Okay.
What are we up to?
So if somebody were considering doing a DIY caribou hunt like we did, and you think about some of the details that are entailed, what advice would you give somebody, for example, on camping?
Like planning on camping it in Alaska? It's probably the food thing. So think your food through really well.
Yeah.
I'm probably not the best guy to listen to on the bears.
Right.
I'm probably not even going to go there. Just
Right.
they in one way they're a lot worse than you'd imagine, but if you let that bother you, you're never going to get to do anything. So just be really confident in what you would do, and you know, if it gets that bad, I think the general understanding is, you know, fight like heck. So you know, that's just part of it. So when I say food, it's literally what you're going to eat, kind of have emergency rations thought out, because it is Alaska. And I've not done much in Alaska that wasn't really remote. And even if you're using other people, in fact, almost especially if you're using other people, it's kind of like, you know yourself, but if you're trusting someone else to come pick you up,
Right.
and then they can't. It's got nothing to do with willingness or maybe ability.
Right.
You know, there were two guys that went up. They weren't even as far north as we were. They were just barely on the north side of the Brooks. They wound up being there for 2 months. You know, they went in September, and you know, the military had to drop them food supplies because, you know, right when they eventually got a chopper in there, you know, which, gosh, what that must have cost. But yeah, they were there for 2 months, and they just dropped them because of the snow. The snow's got to get deep enough to where they can use skis, and they were in that tussock stuff, and this snow came in, but it wasn't good enough for skis. But, you know, no pilot was willing or felt safe, and I think that's probably wise about getting in there and getting them out.
Right.
So obviously, what was their number one problem? It was food.
Absolutely.
So it would probably be to think that through, and the more outdoor experience you have with food, just think about what you've already learned, and use that. And then what if there's no way you can carry enough food?
Right.
So I guess maybe have at least an attempt at a plan for that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't count on fishing, and I wouldn't count on hunting.
Right.
You know, you wouldn't want to count on it, but you'd want to be able and ready to do both.
No question.
And good fishing gear doesn't weigh anything. I mean, I bet my whole fly fishing setup is 5 ounces, you know, and then you've just got, you know, a little thing of flies and some string. So you can keep it really light, well under a pound for fishing. And then if you're going to live off the land, just me, I'm a small game guy.
Right. Right.
It's pretty yummy, and you can get a lot of small game, typically a lot easier, stuff that most people would overlook.
Right.
So
Right.
the problem with hunting is it really, when you need it, it takes some pretty good equipment.
Right.
You know, because now you're talking about snipping something's head off, so you're not destroying the meat.
Yeah.
And 50 yards versus 100 yards, big difference.
Right.
When it comes to a rimfire rifle.
Yep.
You know, some little survival gun that you were carrying. Like we took a 22 mag.
Right.
And the best one I ever had was a 17.
Right.
But that's not enough. That's not enough caliber.
Right.
I mean, for everything, you know, foxes and down, yeah, that's fine. But what if you needed to shoot something bigger, like a wolf?
Right.
You know, 22 mag that'll put the hurt on a wolf.
Right.
So, but it, without a doubt, that 17, I shot over the course of about 10 days, I shot in 2 different areas. I shot 17 ptarmigan one time, and they're just so delicious.
They
And
look like they'd be delicious.
That's all I ate was ptarmigan and blueberries.
Right.
and there
How
was a
healthy is
short adjustment for the diet,
Yeah.
you know, for the old bowels to get adjusted to the new
Right.
diet. But man, that combination was a pretty potent diet because I could hike.
Right. Well, think of the
Man,
protein
I could
energy
hike.
you're getting from the ptarmigan coupled with, I mean, the fruit of berries.
Yeah, I thought it was in heaven. That's the only thing I got, and that was the only hunting. That was the first time I had ever hunted in Alaska, and that's all I got was a whole bunch of ptarmigan and blueberries, and it was raining, just pouring rain and I was just out there picking blueberries in the rain and shooting ptarmigan in the rain, and it was really fun. But so I would have done okay right there,
Right.
but there were lots of squirrels, but I will say that very few of those ptarmigan did I shoot less than 70 yards.
Wow.
Most of them were between 100 and 150. So if you'd have had a shotgun living off the land,
Good
would have
luck.
been really tough. Of course you would have gotten some. It's kind of like,
Right.
you know, bird hunting, but they're real wary
Right.
when they want to be. They're not quite like the blue grouse down here. And so, I mean, I shot some less than 50. And when they were that close, I tried to take their heads off. But I shot a bunch of them over 150 yards. And with a little rimfire rifle, that's getting out there. So
Sure is.
that made the difference, though. Being able to reach out that far made all the difference. So have a little bit of different view, because the hunting thing, you'll see a lot of stuff, but if you're objective about it and you're like, could I actually hit that with a little 22? No, you probably couldn't. I mean, unless it was a really good little 22.
Right.
And so when you're talking about hunting for a survival rifle, you know, a lot of times people think about this little cricket 22. You know, we'll get a little cricket 22 or something like that. Well, it groups a couple inches at 50 yards or something. Well,
It's not going to work.
okay, I guess it'll work for certain things at 50 and less. But
Right.
then if you just go out anytime you're fishing, camping, hunting, or exploring, and just objectively think, if I have to live off the land, you will pretty quickly realize that using a rifle, you're probably going to starve to death. Because you'll see a lot of stuff at 200 yards and you just think, oh, well, if I was living off the land, I could just shoot that. Well, no, you couldn't. It was 200 yards away and you never got any closer to it.
Right.
But because you see it at 200 yards, you're just like, oh man, I saw tons of those things. I could just live off the land.
Right.
And then you go try it sometime.
Right.
You see all this on those survival shows.
Right.
And they just won't jump up and hop in your lap.
Right.
And you're just like, I don't understand it. The last time I was here, they were just everywhere. Yeah, you know.
Well, think of this
I mean, I've
part
seen
of the
a
world.
whole covey of blue grouse at 400 yards.
Right.
It doesn't, you know, I'll be darned. Oh, I could eat so good. Just look at that.
Right.
And there's a whole ravine,
Right.
you know, half day's walk in between you and there. But in your mind, when I was younger, I'm just like, oh, yeah, you could just go up in there and live off the land. You'd just,
Right.
you know, be killing them grouse willy-nilly. It can work out that way.
Right.
But if you're real objective about it, well, I'd shoot them with my pistol. Well, go try that sometimes.
Right.
And now you're 25 yards and in. And so I've just found that living off the land, really making it a long-range game, oh man, makes all the difference in the world.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, the 22 mag I haven't quite got where I like. It's a little persnickety. And you don't have a lot of control of your ammunition on rimfire. So it would be the food and have a plan
Right.
for more food, because you can't
Right.
carry enough food.
Right.
And
Yeah, you can't.
the best tip that I can give overall, they were, you know, too expensive for us, you know, but that I've done firsthand is it's extremely expensive, but it's really not in the grand scheme of things. There are these 24-hour rations. Okay, it is a 24-hour food supply, and that's about 30, in this case, it's typically around 3,800 calories. So that's more, actually.
That is a
But if
lot
you're
of
hunting,
calories.
that's
You're-
about
you're
right.
burning a lot of calories.
Right.
Right.
And they are full combat rations. And of all things, they're French, you know. They like to retreat in style, I guess. So they're delicious. I mean, they're not just yummy.
Right.
They're downright good.
Right.
Like there's a lot of women in this country that can't cook as good as what is in those rations.
Right.
Most women in this country can't cook
Right.
as good as what's in those rations. And they're about $60 a piece. And to me, initially that seemed outrageous, but even if we had done something like that, I mean, that's too expensive. We didn't have to do that, and that would be too expensive. But if you think about it, these suckers are about, well, they're probably a little bit more than a pound, but they're about this big. They're probably 10 inches by about 7.5 inches, and not even a couple of inches thick. And a brilliant engineer packaged those things. They have a stove in there. They have fuel. Few ways to start fire, like 6 cups of coffee, and then 3 full meals plus snacks and protein bars.
Right.
And they're delicious. I mean,
Right.
I thought it was a joke. My brother's telling. I mean, they have like duck liver pate, and I love pate.
Right.
They're gourmet.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. And they have
It's amazing.
a little stove in there. Well, you could carry, you pack up, okay, let's say that 3 days worth was, 3 to 5 pounds. That is absolutely amazing.
Right.
That's the best thing I've ever seen. Not only for emergency rations, but even as mainstay, because if you really think about it, you can't eat that cheap, $20 a meal,
Oh,
$60 a day.
Right.
And so if this is a hunt of a lifetime or something like that,
Right.
or the potential trip of a lifetime, work your food out and then throw you in 3 of those, or just bite the bullet and buy 10 of those a man, which is
Right.
like $600, but
right.
you're not going to eat that cheap, and strangely enough, probably not that good.
Right.
And yeah, that's the neatest thing I've ever seen. I've only done it on these short trips, and I'm such a cheapskate. They were given to me. Like my brother bought me some for Christmas,
Right.
and it was one of the best Christmas gifts I ever bought. And he said, me and my wife use these on dates sometimes. We
That's
just
great.
drive out in the middle of nowhere and eat these because she loves them and I love them. And
Yeah. Yeah.
work your food out. That thing, which is a French combat 24-hour MRE, you can find them online. And then having a, not just one plan for your food, but a backup plan for food.
Right.
Anything you have to cook, and that's and most of the times guys probably get out there and they do get a little bit light on the protein,
Right. Right.
or they do the fake protein.
Right.
And I guess know your body.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
But if you actually try and burn that stuff, that's the protein that's from soy and whey, man, it catches up to you. It doesn't work out for me. I've been told it actually doesn't work out for most guys, but,
That's interesting because I think it does work out for me.
yeah.
I do
So-
a lot of whey protein, and it's like, for me, it's like throwing a log on the fire as opposed to throwing Christmas paper on it. It just
Yeah.
burns instantly. It
So-
sticks with me.
Well, that's what's important. Just know your body and already know
But I've
what
been
works.
practicing a long time.
Yeah. Well, just know what works, because if you go out there and this is some type of food that you're not used to or you haven't tried
Right.
out,
Yeah. It is not the place to get sick.
And even, I think you can make yourself sick without there being any pathogens or anything
Oh, yeah.
involved at all, just because you're crunching like these granola protein bars
Right.
that you never eat in
Right.
normal life.
Right.
And after like 3 days,
10 times the rough
got
that
all
you'd
kinds of-
normally eat, not
yeah,
to
you-
get too graphic about it.
you've got all
but
kinds of issues.
Yeah, no, you definitely got to think of
That
think
is
through it.
probably the most important thing.
Right.
Is the food. And as you can imagine, I think we talked about it a lot, and we were very blessed, controlling your gut. I mean, there aren't toilets everywhere.
Right.
That is, at the very least, it's highly inconvenient. So you just, if you drink coffee once a day,
Right.
they even teach this in sniper school. Whatever your normal routine is, figure out a way to carry that to the field.
Right. Right.
And then do it in the field if possible.
Right.
Because you will go farther,
Right.
you will last longer
Right.
without having, it's to be in an unfamiliar terrain environment without having all this other stuff,
Right.
coming down on you.
really
You can
true.
try out stuff and do all the testing during training and your own little practice runs or whatever. And yeah, they put
Right.
them through, hell and training and all that. But when you get out in the field, it's like, hey, I mean, not anymore, but
Right.
literally, and you can just go even read the old manuals or talk to the old guys. You got your cigarettes?
Right.
Okay, you got 3 different ways to light those cigarettes.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Right.
you wouldn't allow that now. You're probably not going to be a sniper if you smoke, but used to
Right.
it was,
Right.
yeah, we took all that away in training, but now you're going to be there 14 days.
Right. Be consistent.
Be as comfortable and consistent as
Right.
possible, because diarrhea is not going to, that is going to be an impediment to this mission.
No
And that is
question.
a huge impediment
It
to,
really-
to hunting.
Right.
And,
it is.
And I've done that a lot. I've messed my gut up
Right.
a lot.
Yeah. I mean, even
Hunting and fishing, because I'm just so into it,
Right.
and it's like food. Yeah.
Right.
I've got tons of whatever.
right.
And then after about 2 or 3 days, now you're not hunting anymore
Right.
because you've eaten all this stuff. Your body's like, what's all this grain?
Right.
You know, if you're it's not used to eating
Exactly.
granola
Yeah, I don't
bars,
need
you
a
know,
lot
you're
of
doing soy protein.
Carbs and stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
you can
when
get
I do,
acclimated to anything.
It's shocking. Yeah, all the Peter Attia, Huberman stuff about intermittent fasting. I do that. Like I quail hunted Saturday and Sunday and 20,000 steps on Saturday. No problem for me, because I do not eat until I normally eat anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I eat stuff that I almost eat 7 days a week.
Yeah.
It's not the time to
Yeah.
be experimenting.
Yeah. And it's nighttime,
Right.
because on something that could, you know, it doesn't have to be a life-threatening trip, but call it what it is. You're in life-threatening
Oh, yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
Okay. You're weather, critters, all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And getting even, you know, so sleep and food are real important. Well, if you have to get up 3 times
Okay.
to go to the bathroom, if at all possible, figure out some way around that. You know, and if you know, it's bad enough you have to get out of your bag. Try not to get out of your tent. If you have to get out of your tent, that is going to add up really quickly, very fast. And it's something that,
great point.
you know, you really don't think about, but that can really catch up to you quick. And after about 3 days of that, and I mean, you know, any good hunt's going to take you. I mean, we didn't find caribou till the 4th day
Right.
that we left Amarillo, and we're camping the whole way. So our hunt really started as soon as we flew out of here.
Right.
Little things like that in your home
Right.
you don't really think of.
Got a bathroom around every
Just
corner.
really pays to be honest with yourself and be objective.
Yeah.
And what's going to get you are things that are
Right.
typically going to be somehow food or diet related. And you know, one other little tidbit I'd throw in there is something that my mom taught me. When you're doing something like that, throw in your little first aid kit Imodium, which is a constipator.
Right.
Because if you're in a situation where, you know, you screwed up anyways,
Right.
and you got diarrhea or something, the cycle, the problem will get infinitely worse. That Imodium will at least let you stay in your bag for like 8 hours.
Right.
And it's kind of common sense. Read the directions. There's a little
Right.
bit of an art to it. You can take too much,
Right.
but you know, and I have used it.
Right.
And you get to where you got just the right amount, you know, to essentially stop you up and kind of bring you back to normal.
Right.
And let's say if you had to travel, or if we had to fly,
Right.
how are you going to cover these incredibly long distances with diarrhea?
Right.
So suddenly something so simple
Yeah.
could actually become almost life-threatening
Right.
because of the environment that you're in.
I mean,
And so
we've
just have a
obviously done
plan.
2 trips to Alaska.
Yeah.
I didn't know your situation. I know I never had a problem, but when I'm in my house, I hydrate constantly. And, you know, I'm old enough, I probably got a, prostate the size of a softball, who knows? And I'll have to get up sometimes twice a night, which isn't great for your sleep patterns.
It doesn't
I never
bother
have
me
to
at
do
home.
that in Alaska.
Right. Yeah, but
because
we were intentional.
Absolutely.
We both were, because, you know, you're like,
Well, and getting
you
in
know,
a plane
because
and
we're
flying
throttling,
for
you know, I
5-6 hours.
yeah, you just kind of do some simple
some
arithmetic.
common
Okay,
sense.
I only need this much.
Right.
I'm not going to get dehydrated.
I'll be thirsty when I get there.
but
and
once
that's
we're
all right.
done flying,
Right.
you know, I'll tank up.
Right.
And
Exactly right.
so being really conscious about your gut. Suddenly your gut, of all crazy things. I
Yeah.
mean, I think, you know, an army marches on its stomach. Well,
does.
guess what?
And think how,
That
I mean,
suddenly-
just how
that-
terrible.
But
how
I
you'd
never
mess a
used to
whole
think of
hunting
that.
Trip up.
And the oh yeah, but the saying is so true. You know, amateurs talk tactics,
Right. Right.
but professionals who've done it a lot talk logistics.
Right.
What are we going to eat? And where are we going to go to the bathroom?
Right.
I mean, that's your logistics.
Yeah.
How are we going to sleep? What are we
Right.
going to take with us?
Right.
You know. But when you're new, amateurs, it's just like, where are they going to be at? What kind of a gun am I going to use? Well,
Right.
it doesn't really matter, you know, just
Right.
getting killed. The point is, what are you going to eat?
Right.
And how are you going to get sleep when you're there? Are you
Right.
going to get cold?
Yeah. Yeah. Those amateurs, you know, eat a huge lunch, you know, on a quail hunt where you're just walking from start to finish all day, and you just look at them and go, really? I mean, you do that at night if you have to do that at all, but you don't do it in the middle of a hunt. I mean, you're going to be out there in the middle of nowhere of a mesquite bush and a cactus, and let me know how it works out for you.
Yeah, I'm amateur enough doing something like that I've never done before, and don't in country I've never seen and never imagined I'd be in. I mean,
right.
You know, I mean, you're so remote. At some point, you almost kind of try and not even think about it.
Yeah, it's best not to think about it. You know, no good will come from it.
Yeah, it's just, it's even hard to really wrap your head around it. After you leave and you kind of look back and you're looking at a satellite map and you're just like, wow.
Right.
Because you see everything between you and civilization and you're just like, huh.
Yeah, long way.
A long way.
Long way. And to think, you know, even the pragmatics of, and you did the research and you made the selection, but that tent we use.
That's pretty incredible.
It's so incredible.
Yeah, I guess every now and then you get it right.
We don't have any sponsors, but the Rushke's got that one right.
I think it's an RBM tent, and I'd seen them a long time ago. The one regret I had with that tent was I felt like it was too big. Now, I wouldn't say that once it's set up, but I mean, that sucker's heavy.
It is.
But fortunately, we were able to take everything else we needed, you know.
What's it weigh, 55 pounds or so?
Yeah, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, when you got a
whole double wall, well, it's 5 layers actually. There's 5 layers to the wall, so it's got all this insulation.
Up that far on the side, keep water out and stuff.
Which I think is really important, because that felt like you were in a cabin.
Absolutely.
You know, even without
keeping the no-see-ums out.
That fire, and then you know, that wood-burning stove was
great.
Yeah.
I mean, not only for cooking, like the caribou, the spoils of the trip, but just warmth if you need it.
Yeah, it was so easy to get out of bed in the morning.
Right.
You know, and you probably saw I set it up right next to my sleeping bag, and I stack all the wood.
Yeah, you had it all ready.
Well, you know, our fuel bags, you know, we just took our fuel bags,
put a little,
and there's always enough in the empty ones. There's still, I don't know, 1/10 of a pint of fuel left in there, something.
Right.
And I would just, and I had a paper towel, and I'd just rip a piece of a paper towel off. You know, don't try this home type thing, but I'd dip it up and I'd just soak that towel in that gasoline early in the morning. You could probably hear me unscrewing that fuel cap, and then just fling it in there on that wood, close the door and light it through the vent, and don't give it time to vaporize in there, because it's kind of a so just light it real quick and it'll just be a real gentle and that stove fired off that fast every morning, and within 10 minutes it was like 75, 80 degrees in there, and you could.
And just the way the whole thing's built, I mean, with the stovepipe and then in the tent, I mean, being able to vent the smoke out and everything, it's just, it's a great setup. And you're right.
Yeah, I'm
sometimes
very grateful for it.
Carrying it out of the alders or something, you know, you might go, a little heavy, but it's not that big a deal.
You're definitely not going to really haul it anywhere.
No.
It's a vehicle thing, but, you know, kind of my thinking was there, if you wound up being somewhere a while,
a long time,
especially at the onset of winter, that actually is a winter tent.
Oh, no question.
For surviving.
And the room
like
it would have given you, had we gotten really wet, and being able to hang clothes up on a rack and get them dried.
Yeah, we did. It's just not, and I may be speaking out of turn here. You know, we did get really wet. We got rained on constantly.
Yeah.
But it's not as big a deal as everybody's makes it out to be.
Right.
And you know, I went on, you know, a hunt with my buddy Tom on the western side of the Alaska range, and it would have been in Unit 16, and it just rained constantly for 4 days straight, and I'd go out and get soaked and shoot all these ptarmigan, and your clothing is super important.
Right.
I don't really have good waterproof clothing. I think you had great waterproof clothing.
I do.
And I did the wax,
Right.
and I mean, traditional stuff, and
Right.
waxed my canvas jacket and all that, and it repelled all the water fine.
Right.
But in a survival situation, the clothes could be pretty important.
No question.
But I've not seen that really ruin anyone's hunt as fast as I have the food.
Right.
But it has great drying racks, and that stove will dry anything out.
Mm-hmm. No
But
question.
we didn't really have
Right.
to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I made an upgrade from the first trip to the second trip because I was just thinking we're getting later in the year, so I went with a layered system. But the big thing, I wore shell pants, shell jacket. Well, you couldn't get, I mean, you'd have to be out in a torrential downpour for that to work. But, with the right base and take care of your feet.
Yeah.
Take care of your socks.
Yeah.
Just common sense stuff.
So if you're going to do the wood stove thing, I would say make sure and bring a saw. And not to be cliche, I typically don't go with what most people would recommend, but I think we had a silky saw because of the weight. It was just one of the lightest things out there that could cut that fast. And that makes your labor gathering firewood so much less. Because you got to get it into the right size pieces to get in, and those bigger pieces is where the money's at, rather than doing a whole bunch of little twigs.
Absolutely.
So if you can bring a saw with you that weighs slightly less than a pound like that, that's almost more than an axe. That's almost worth more than having an axe. So
Right. It does. No, and that's the pragmatics of that makes all the difference in a bad trip and a great trip. I mean, just being ready for it, and I mean, the MREs that we ate. I'm not picky. To me,
I thought they were yummy.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
but if you get those right ones, the military contractor ones are the best, or the actual Department of Defense. And my buddy Tom got those for us right off the Air Force Base out of the commissary.
Right.
They've got a little deal where they'll,
they were
they'll
great.
sell to civilians, and
Lots of good calories. And having that little heater function that they've got in them to be able to warm stuff up and stuff like that. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I can certainly understand why that's important to people. But it's just those pragmatic things, thinking, like you say, our 10 days could become a lot longer if something happens.
I don't care that is always a possibility.
Absolutely. You got to be prepared.
Now that would have really sucked. And I was absolutely not planning on that and doing everything I could, but it's Alaska.
It is. It is. Things happen, and you just got to be able to, like we talked about, pivot. Have 3 or 4 contingencies, and be able to pivot depending upon weather and everything else, like you talked about last time. Temperatures and altitude, and what could it mean to ice for the plane, and all that sort of thing. But again, the plane helps so much, being able to carry a lot of weight and a long range. So zipping up and down the brooks for 700 or 800 miles, completely doable.
Yeah, surprisingly so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So, focusing on kind of the reality of hunting and camping, any advice for anybody, like on whether the hunting or the butchering, once you take in an animal, and then what we do with it once the work begins?
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to probably get really, good at, I think they call it field dressing and stuff like that.
Right.
My father worked out a way years ago for us to, all of us, my whole family, all my siblings, to butcher all our own livestock and wildlife.
That's great.
And me and my brother Jordan are the main guys. And so I got pretty frustrated with that caribou. It was a little bit harder than what I felt like it should be, just trying to keep everything as clean as I wanted.
Right.
So if you're, just because it's on my mind, I'll just say it. Best thing I can give, advice I can give is on that caribou. Get those suckers gutted so fast, as fast as you can, because he was probably dead for 25 or 30 minutes before I was unzipping him. And that was too long.
Yeah, I know.
And he had that stuff coming out both ends by 30 minutes. Well, it'd take 3 hours. I mean, I've never waited 3 hours on a deer, but I think if you'd waited 3 hours on a deer, they wouldn't bloat like that.
Right.
And that state trooper, the wildlife trooper, told us that's actually how they are.
Yep.
I'm like, really?
I know.
And he goes, yeah, that's the way they do, man. Well, if I'd have known that, I'd have been like, screw the pictures, run up there and start zipping that sucker open, because that was so inconvenient.
Right.
I mean, you just can't get that out of them fast enough to not cause a problem. But the other thing is really know your knives. Don't look up what's a good knife for this. It so doesn't matter. Now, I've got a really amazing little knife that you probably saw.
Right.
And it's like $6. And I got it from, it's a Victor Knox, but they're disposable. But they last for several animals. So they're really not disposable, because you can resharpen them. But I think that most people would look at it and think that's a disposable knife.
Right.
And it's just some little fixed blade. And I always carry one or two of those with me because they weigh nothing. And, for splitting a brisket and stuff, I have that real big heavy knife.
Right.
And I use that, or you can use the saw. But a lot of times what you're going to want to use is some just little bitty sucker. And if you're skinning, make sure it's best to have a really dull one. In that case, I actually flip it around and I use the back side of the blade. So we didn't cut any holes into that hide, but that's the best advice. If you don't skin a lot, odds are you're going to cut that skin full of holes. And we didn't really have any flesh on it.
Right.
In fact, the guys that I dealt with said, "Did you flesh this thing?" I mean, they had to finish fleshing it, but they were like, "This is pretty clean." There's the twitch muscles, that they use, like horses and cattle and caribou and stuff. They got these twitch muscles under their skin where they can just shake their shoulders, they can shake their butt. It's just that hide.
Right.
That likes to stay right on that skin. I do like to go in and divide that. The problem is it's really dangerous, because most people never do anything with a dull knife.
Right.
And their knife's too sharp, so they really cut the hide up. And I cut it up more, than I would have liked. I mean, no real holes or anything, but there were just some close calls. So if you I flip that little blade around backwards and use the back, because it's dull, because you're just slicing that membrane. That helps me get more meat off the hide. But there's nothing wrong with just sitting around camp and, picking it all off. It's kind of fun. And now, I have always done this and would always recommend people, and I always carry 2-3 pounds of salt with me. Now,
I salted him down.
Yeah, there was a guy that I think they call him. There's a guy that met us for the. He wasn't a flesher or a work for a tannery or anything like that. But I'm tanning our caribou hide.
Right.
I wanted to do that and tan my own hides, and so there was a guy up there, and I said, well, it was very affordable. It was like $150, and one of the tanneries up there said, man, that's awesome, good on you. Yeah, we'll flesh that thing for you and just salt it and dry it. That way it'll survive the shipment for sure, rather than just freezing it and bringing it all back. I said, I just got a taxidermist up there, and I said, I don't want it pickled, nothing.
Right.
Just fleshed and, shaved and salted for tanning, and I'll tan it when I get home. And he said, man, that's awesome, good on you. Well, he had a guy pick it up at the airport, and that guy was just like, oh my gosh, you salted this thing? Don't ever do that. most tanneries won't even take it. And I'm like, well, yeah, you know, this guy will.
Right.
You know, I already talked to him. But what he's talking about is, of course, he didn't see the hide, so he had no clue, you know, how much I'd gotten off there. And I had a lot more to get, but if you know, you can, you know, skin animals and there'll be that much meat, you know, left on the hide.
Right.
And if you salt that down, number one, you're not doing any good because you're trying to keep you're killing the bacteria that causes hair slippage with the salt. You're not doing any good, and it sucks all the moisture out.
Right.
I actually think it makes it easier to flesh. He said it makes it impossible. Well, yeah, if it shrivels up and dries like a crust, which is what he was talking about.
Right.
Or if you know, in some cases though, it'll just shrivel that meat. You got to get a bunch of it on there, and 2 pounds is not enough, you know, for a caribou. But carrying 2 or 3 pounds on any trip like that at all whatsoever
Right.
of loose salt is probably actually one of the greatest little tricks that I've just developed and needed over the years. It is so handy, that salt. Never mind the food element of it, but also for the food element for potential survival situations.
Right.
You've got to, it's really not that much, but it's a decent amount of stuff to preserve meat
Right.
and preserve all kinds of things in a survival setting and also in a big game setting. You know, so we used 2 pounds of salt on that caribou hide, you know, and it came back home in perfect shape because I didn't know, you know, I'm like, well, the weather's looking good. I think I'm flying straight to Anchorage. Well, what if it turns out I couldn't?
Right.
And the weather kept us there for a couple of days.
Right.
You're going to lose your hide?
Yeah. It'd be a sad day.
With salt, you won't.
Right.
And so, little, you know, things on the butchering like that is don't get too caught up in what kind of knife it is.
Right.
And, you know, just do what's good for you. And you can skin a big old, you know, caribou with, you know, just a pocket knife because you're really not cutting that much.
Right.
You know, just a little, you know, good old fashioned Case Stockman or something.
Right.
And those interchangeable blade knives are pretty cool, but they're sharper than all get out.
Right.
So that's great for, you know, actually getting into the meat and stuff. So if you have a little knife you like and salt, and then, you know, you're probably going to need more like 4 or 5 pounds of salt. But see, that's the thing too. If you had 4 or 5 pounds of salt on most, you know, medium-sized, you know, big game and smaller, nothing like a moose or an elk, but I'd say mule deer down for sure. You can preserve whole quarters
Right.
for weeks with that much salt.
Right.
So there again,
Right.
in a survival situation, you're not going to lose all your meat. Or if you get stuck there and the outfitter doesn't come and get you or whatever's going on. I've never heard that. I've never heard people say,
Right.
oh, bring a bunch of salt. And maybe other people do. But man, is that that's a handy thing. And I use it up almost every time,
Right.
you know, always use it up.
But you know, that's what they used to do in the old days in the smokehouses.
And that was imperative.
It
I mean, they
was.
fought
They didn't
wars
have
over that.
refrigeration.
They fought wars
Right.
over the salt licks.
Over sodium.
You know,
Right.
the Indians and the pioneers and even the colonists and the
Absolutely.
redcoats. I mean, even the redcoats knew, hey, we take these salt licks, we can bring this war to a halt. These people ain't going to be able to preserve meat. They're going to starve.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know how more people actually don't use salt and take it. Maybe they do. I'm just it's just not one of the things you really hear about or read. I dropped the ball on that on the salmon trip, and boy, I was feeling it.
Yeah.
We really needed some salt to, you know,
Preserve.
yeah. Well, yeah, I think I would have, because I could have got another 3. I would have caught more and kept more. You know, we just didn't have any salts, and you're just on basic refrigeration, which you know wound up working out pretty good. But for refrigeration, you know, in the plains, all you're going to have.
Right.
And you know, with the altitude and everything. So I'd say, you know, salt, get a little knife you're comfortable with, figure out some way to, you know, split the brisket and all that. And I mean, you know, the game bags and all that are kind of a duh, but
Right. Yeah.
yeah, most people just probably overthink their knives, probably like they do their weapons.
Right.
It just doesn't matter that much if you're just really, really good with it. That's what.
Right.
That's what
well
counts.
sighted in, and you know where it shoots, and it'll consistently do it. you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really sound, detailed advice for people as they're thinking about camping and field dressing and all of that.
Well, I mean, that's what I do, and it'll get quite a bit better. I'm not good at, I wish I was better at breaking down an animal like that on the ground, on its own hide. I've seen some, natives do some stuff
Right.
that I wished, I was probably a little better at it, and maybe one day I will be.
Right.
I can cut up a, steer or a hog real quick, hanging from a caterpillar, but
Right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. You don't exactly have a tractor to hang an
Yeah.
animal with in that part of the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, and you got to really break the animal down pretty good. It's unfortunate, now there's laws limiting how much you can break it down.
Right.
That makes it pretty tough on the flying out.
Yeah. They
But
want to be able to identify and everything.
Yeah, they use the bone. Now they're even using the bone structure, so you have to leave bone in,
Right.
not just proof of sex attached. You actually have to leave the bones in.
Right.
And which you didn't used to, but
Right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. No, that's I would think really good advice for
Yeah.
somebody who's they're thinking about going up there.
Yeah, and I'll probably do, just I guess as a beginner, amateur, whatever, my experiences as a non-resident getting into hunting in Alaska.
Right.
From a non-professional standpoint, all DIY, self-guided, which is very, very doable, strangely. Right. In fact, it's so doable, I'm surprised more people, well, initially I was surprised why more people why would you ever go to Colorado, and they have terrible fish and game management for one, but, and now non-resident hunting is illegal there anyways. But they've been headed there for a long time. Why would you ever go there when you can go to Alaska and ironically,
Right.
it'll cost about the same,
Yeah.
And if you're totally DIY.
Right.
Initially, that's the way I used to think, but it's the environment, and that, if something goes wrong,
Right.
closest town's 10 miles away.
Right.
You're 3-5 miles from a road. Head downhill in the state of Colorado. You will hit a road.
And community eventually. Yeah, you will.
And that's just not the case up there.
Right.
So it probably is. It's not so much about hunting, but Alaska's probably for, an outdoorsman. That's.
Right.
I don't know that you necessarily got to be really experienced, because I'm probably not really as experienced as a lot. But you got to really be able to think and be comfortable with the possibility of being stuck somewhere for a really long time.
Right.
And that just doesn't happen down here.
No, it doesn't.
At all.
Somebody's going to come get you.
Yeah. Up there they will, but they may not be able
When they
to.
can. Right.
And that just doesn't happen down here.
Right.
It just doesn't.
Right.
So so I'll do a video sometime on just my experience, but it's kind of unromantic, but most of it centers around a really good, thorough understanding of the legal system. Now, the hunting stuff has gotten in Alaska pretty convoluted, and like a lot of the states down here have. So, classic example is, the harvest ticket episode we had, with the wildlife department.
Right.
So my mistake there is Alaska allows digital license.
Right.
They allow digital harvest tickets. And I went back through and reread it, and of course the guy's right. You have to have that in they have a well, this is the best way I can sum it up. Like I said, this is really for another video, but you got your general hunting license, you got your big game tag. That's pretty standard. That there's over the counter, there's registration, there's draw. I would never do a draw.
Right.
But that's just me. Knock yourself out if that's your thing. And registration hunt, is fine. Those come with caveats. What that means is you're going to tell them, hey, I think this is what I'm going to be hunting, and I think this is where I'm going to be hunting. You almost register. But it's free. You can do it online, and it's 100% digital. Right. Then they have these harvest tickets. There's a digital version that they call it validating it through the app. Or you can do the paper model. They don't care. So my mistake was, and they give you on caribou, and then they say they won't give it to you. You have to ask for it. Mm-hmm. So in order to shoot a caribou anywhere in the state of Alaska, you have to have a harvest ticket. When you buy your tag, it's one of those, it's free. So you'd think it'd come with it, but it won't. They just expect you to be smart enough. Oh, okay. You're going to hunt a caribou? Yeah, I paid $650 for the tag. Okay, well then, right. Do you want a harvest ticket? You didn't ask.
Right.
I mean, which is kind of funny. So it kind of goes that way. So my understanding was, because they were just like, well, you can, carry it with your paper copy in the field, or you can do the digital copy through the app. Mm-hmm. Well, that is literally all you can do. When you request them and they send them to you, they send them by email, and it's a digital copy. So I download that and keep it on my phone right with my license and everything like that. And so we got checked out by this really nice wildlife trooper who was just super fascinated with the plane, and I think that's really all he was interested in. And great guy, and he checks us all out and everything. He's like, and you got your harvest ticket? Oh yeah, I got my harvest ticket. And that's really the only thing he, and he was like, okay, well if you kill one, you're going to have that. I'm like, oh yeah, I got him. And I printed off paper copies of everything because, the way I am, I always have extras. But for whatever reason, I didn't have paper copies of the harvest ticket. And they said, you can either have the digital or the digital version they're talking about is on the app. Now, I was aware of that too. Mm-hmm. I've got the app and the download. Well, here's the problem. If your phone shuts off, like you run the batteries down and it shuts off, it logs you out of the app. Now, your stuff is still in there. Right. But you have to live, which isn't going to happen, go into that app, log in, and validate this harvest ticket. So you're only going to do that somewhere you have cell phone signal.
Not in the remote area we were.
In a remote area, you can get in and validate it, and then it uploads it kind of later type deal, but only if you're signed in. And so, which we'll probably wrap up with kind of a neat story. It wasn't, just a few minutes after we shoot this caribou. And he's on the ground. We're standing there looking at him. And you can hear a plane coming. Right. And I know that shocked both of us because we're just like, who else could possibly?
Right.
Which is probably, a vain thought. But you're just like, who could possibly be out in the earth this far into the wilderness like us?
Right.
And how did they get here? But it's just like, wow, what's this? And this plane comes down and it circles us. And he circles us 2 or 3 times and gets down and buzzes, our plane. He was pissed. Like, he was not happy. Goes over there, flies down the valley somewhere, and lands down there somewhere on one of those little lakes. And so I think we were just about wrapped up with the butchering.
We were.
And here's another plane.
Right.
Which now, I'm just like, what is going on? So the wildlife trooper comes and he lands, and he tells, he circles us, and I told you, I was like, Tracy, I think that's that wildlife trooper. And you were like, you think so? I'm like, man, I think that's a state air patrol plane. And and he was super cool. He circled us and was just like, whoa, hey, and he lands and pulls up and he's like, you found them. And I said, yes, sir. And he wasn't really too helpful. He narrowed us down to within about about 100-mile swath. So I guess that's about 2,000 square miles of real estate.
Right.
But probably 100 by 200-mile swath. He said there's somewhere in there.
Outfitter.
But he seemed shocked. He was just like, you found them. And I said, well, yeah, you said these things were all the way over next to Canada. And he's like, you're there.
Right.
I was like, oh, well, yeah, I guess I am. and anyway, he's like, oh, that's great. Well, he checks us out. Well, anyway, he gets to the bottom of it, and he said, "No, bud, you've got to have either a paper copy or that digital version on the app." Well, I've got a digital version right here in my email. Yeah, well, unfortunately, that one's not valid unless it's in paper form. We email you that, but you have to print it off somewhere. And he was really nice about it.
Oh, it couldn't have been nicer.
And so I knew that, but I knew that you had to have one or the other, and I thought I had both, worst case scenario. Well, I didn't have the paper one. Then it turns out I didn't have the digital one either. It was super nice, and so I got written up for that. Yeah. But you could tell he felt so bad about it, because you're like, man, that's so cool. You got an awesome caribou, but he said, but why I'm here. Then he gets to it.
Right.
And I just happened to see you. Did a plane come through here?
Sure did.
And I said, yes, sir. And it shocked the heck out of us. And he said, yeah. What was it? And I said, well, I think it was a 210, on floats. And he asked me the color. Now I can't remember. I said, yes, sir, that was it.
Right.
And he said, yeah, well, I'm following him. And he said, that's an illegal, is poaching, is an illegal operation,
Right.
And I guess he was bringing in some international customers or something, but he said, yeah, we've been watching him for a while. He'll have to come out of these boonies here pretty long. We're waiting for him at the airports. But it was just like, oh, and then I got to thinking about it. Yeah, I guess we are so remote. If you were going to do something illegal as all get out, this is probably where he thinks he would be safe. But those troopers go everywhere.
Yep, they sure do.
Yeah. And he was pretty good with that plane too.
He was. Yeah, he was a fine pilot.
Yeah, they don't pay him enough for that though. Like, I wouldn't. The places that he goes and how long he's in that plane, and they only give him 5% more if you can fly as good as he can.
Wow. Yeah. You'll recall it.
But with Alaska, most people probably won't care, but if you're really into it, this is just the stuff that I guess at least that point hung me up. Now Alaska's getting to the point where it's got a bunch of gotchas because of all things. No digital version of this is allowed. When you buy your tag, they will mail you through the U.S. Postal Service, and you know how reliable that is.
The best.
Another piece of paper called your tag. It's your tag validation. So if you haven't tracking this, you've got like 4 different of these things. So you got to have your tag, and then they will mail you. On one of my tags, they mailed it separately. This piece of paper that you can't get a replacement for in any time soon, and it goes in the U.S. Postal Service. So from what I've read, if they lose it, you're just screwed. Right. So get all this. We decided to go like a month ahead. And they say allow like 14 to 21 days to get all your stuff, because they just use the mail. Wow. And so it got here in like 10 days, because I ordered it like 2 weeks before we left. Right. So you've got to have that written piece of paper. Unfortunately, I had that. Right. And there's no digital version that's allowed, but it says that. And so, I had like 3 of those. Yep. But I made copies, and there's going to be that piece of paper. You're going to have, and it's a validation to prove that you bought the tag. Your receipt's not good enough. This is a thing. You're swearing and attesting that you did in fact buy this tag, even though you've got a receipt showing you did. And then you got your tag. Then you're going to have this harvest ticket that you got to know you have to ask for. Fortunately, I knew you had to ask for them, but when they give them to you, you either got to print them off, and that app will log you out. So do not. And the trooper told us that. Don't. That app. Right. You need to carry a paper copy, because it has to be validated right then, not when you get back. Well, the way it was kind of worded, once I figured out how it worked, I figured you just, it's almost like a harvest reporting, like on a registration hunt, and within 3 days of your hunt being over, you got to validate it and report it. No, you got to do it right then, immediately. Right. So watch out for that.
Absolutely. Then those are the kind of nuances somebody else can learn from our experience, that unless you go through it, the whole schmear. Just important things to understand.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
Alaska's amazing. It is so remarkable. And
Yeah. Well, the amazing thing is, small world. He knows a guy that works with my brother-in-law.
state
You know,
trooper in
if he,
Texas.
yeah, if he doesn't know him personally.
Right.
And so, you know, it's just such a small world because my sister calls me and is like, so, did you run into an Alaska state trooper up there? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they told Daniel that was you. They saw you on the internet and they're like, oh, we know him. Yeah, I stopped in and checked them out. Yeah, he is he your brother-in-law?
That's funny.
So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah. No, he was obviously a fine pilot, and as he looked at our plane, I think he was maybe a bit envious.
oh yeah, I'm sure.
You know.
Having to fly those government planes, he was quite clear that they do not allow any improvements because that could, you know, now this is me talking at this point, but I'm guessing like the other things we're finding out with our government, that could possibly improve the efficiency of his ability to do his job, and we wouldn't want that, by God, on our conscience.
It probably would. I mean, a little better avionics maybe, and some things like that might.
How about a modern engine that's not carbureted and air cooled?
I know. How about pins and needles? And
yeah. How about a
you're in
little
Alaska.
flight deck in that sucker
Exactly. Couldn't help but
with an autopilot?
right. Make life a little easier.
Well, I'd just love to hear that explained, how that is so much safer. Well, we're the government and we need things safe and reliable, so we do it like they did back in the 1930s, because on account of it makes so much less sense.
Yeah. Well, Garmin's been around since the 90s, and they've helped safety too. They've figured out the whole platform concept, and it's
Yeah.
all improvement.
Yeah.
See that weather a long ways out there, and autopilot, and just the whole schmear.
Yeah.
Just makes the plane that much better.
Yeah.